Hello, Bill.
Good morning, Matt.
Hello, Bob.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Doing well. This is
This is strange. 3 people on DMZ.
a menage.
There's no limits on the DMZ.
There's no rules in the DMZ, folks.
But wait, we've been doing this for how many years? But I don't think we've ever had 3 at one time.
Is that right?
Matt,
Never.
it's very, very dirty of you, Matt.
I mean, we've swapped partners occasionally, but we've never had 3.
We
people.
TMI. Family network, family show. I mean, look, you routinely refer to Andy Griffith, for God's sake. I mean, make up your mind. What kind of show is this?
A lot. What happens in Mayberry stays in Mayberry.
It's funny.
I'm guessing everyone who is a fan of the DMZ knows who Robert Wright is. But maybe. Why don't you tell us who you are?
I thought you were going to say they know who Andy Griffith is. They're probably...
Well, that goes without saying.
That does go without saying. Okay, so I am, and if all goes according to plan, by the way, this show will be on both of our podcast feeds. So this is a special episode of The Wright Show, a third one per week, whereas normally we do 2 per week, and an episode of the DMZ. We think, if it turns out to be technically possible to indeed put these things on all these feeds, given the way our database works. But I'm Robert Wright. 17 and a half years ago, I co-founded Bloggingheads TV with Mickey Kaus and a tech guy named Greg Dingle. And that's a platform that you guys have been on for these many years. You've been one of our regular shows. Originally, there was a show called The Weekend Blog.
Weekend Blog was, at least his first Weekend Blog was October 28th, 2007. So just
that was not with me, right?
That was not with you. That was, I think, initially with Con Carroll.
Uh-huh.
And that was just under 15 years ago.
And Bill Butler, I think,
he occasionally subbed. But Bill and Con created some sparks, I gotta say.
Con was a different cat than Matt Lewis.
Yep.
And Con is over at the Washington Examiner now. He went to Heritage, and then he went on the Hill. He was a Senator Mike Lee for a long time, and he always likes to throw big roundhouses. And in my opinion, not always rooted in a factual accuracy.
Now, if Con's not here to reply, we cannot cast aspersions like that.
I remember when Con was at National Journal's Hotline, and he appeared on Hugh Hewitt's radio show. This is my memory. And I think
that's when he first came on, because he was with the Hotline. He was for a straight news operation, which is probably, I think, why, Bob, you brought him on.
But Hugh accused him of being like a leftist or something, which was now funny. So yeah, maybe.
So anyway, people may wonder, what am I doing here? Part of the answer is I've actually long wanted to do this. I'm a fan of the show. I listen to DMZ, ideally Thursday night when you guys feel like posting on Thursday, which is my preference, because then I can listen to it Thursday night as I take a walk. And then I don't have to do any work prepping for my Friday podcast with Mickey Kaus. I just repeat whatever you guys said. I'm just like, Bill Scher is my ventriloquist, since I'm kind of left of center, But I also draw on the valuable perspective of Matt Lewis, which helps us understand what's going on the other side of the political spectrum. But really, it's a great. It's kind of perfect for me because I don't pay super close attention to Washington politics, really. And it's not my first love, but I need to talk about it, especially with Mickey. And you guys are the perfect way to catch up. And the fact that you have these different perspectives makes it, gives you kind of a balanced understanding. And the fact that you actually like each other. Not to draw another contrast between Matt and Con Carroll, but the fact that you actually like each other makes it a painless experience.
I will say, I did in the Con Carroll days. I at least one time I went down to DC, and Con and I had dinner, and we had a delightful conversation.
Right.
I found Con a perfectly pleasant company, outside of being on air, but he was always a better deal with on air.
Well, that's the funny thing is that there are people who get along on air, but not in person, and people who get along in person and not on air. But Bill and I, we scratch.
Well, I said, with Matt, what you see is what you get. Matt doesn't have a fake on, not to say Com's fake, but doesn't have an online.
Let's devote this hour to trying to get Con to actually file a lawsuit, Bill. Okay, that's what
you guys should have done. You guys should have done like Simon and Garfunkel, where you record separately. Like he would ask a question, you reply to it. You wouldn't even need to interact.
Yeah.
But Matt's first The Week in Blog appearance was February 2009. So a little more than 13 years ago. And he became co-host the month after that, official co-host. And then he pulled the Michael Jordan, I'm going to go play baseball thing, quitting in 2010.
It worked about as well as Michael Jordan.
What sport did he take up? I mean, was he focusing on CNN at that point or what? What was he doing in 2010? He felt I remember, and there was that great collage of you guys like walking on the beach and stuff.
I will remember you, right?
Yeah, prepared by the great Milton Lawson. But then you came back. It was like, it was so good, people probably thought it was staged. It was like a fake breakup so that we could have the drama of the reunion episode.
He came back as a rotating co-host 2 months later. And then...
right, was it Kirsten Soltis Anderson?
She was just Soltis back then. I mean, we'd Amanda Carpenter. Lots of luminaries, grace the Week in Blog gates, DMZ gates.
I feel like most of them have surpassed us, Bill. I'm not sure what that says. But it's a star-studded cast of people who have filled in.
But you were right. You became regular co-host again January 2012, and we became DMZ March 2012. So almost exactly 10 years ago was this DMZ.
That is amazing because we used to be the Week in Blog, and basically we were going through what was happening in the blogosphere. What was Michelle Malkin blogging about? What was Eravos, or I don't even know, like Daily Kos and all these.
Atrios and Daily Kos.
Atrios. Yeah. I combined them. The blogosphere is not what it once was.
While we're turning this episode to long-standing grievances of Bill Scher, that's always under my skin. Atrios blocked me on Twitter, and I don't know why.
Oh man!
I mean, we were both like OG bloggers in the bushes. I actually went stayed at his apartment when I did my book tour. And
let's just take turns. I got an A- in 20th century American history when I deserved an A my sophomore year. Matt, your turn. Do you have any grievances?
I have many. I could air many of them, but no, it is interesting that the people along the way who you maybe were friends with in this business, and then they go away or they block you. It's happened to me too, Bill.
Sam Harris blocked me. I mean, let's do our blocking grievances.
Sam Harris blocked you for real? Yeah.
Well, wow. if somebody wrote the piece about you that I wrote about him, blocking would be just the beginning. We're going to do a couple of things, right? First of all, we're going to talk about some changes to come. But also I want to continue the larger conversation, which I can include a certain amount of reminiscing. That would be great with me. And also maybe some actual political commentary and analysis of the kind that people are used to. There are questions I want to ask you both along those lines. So
this feels like the big meeting though, where the boss calls in the employees and talks about downsizing or even better, right sizing.
Yeah.
And so to the audience, I have to tell you now, we're letting some of you go.
Yeah.
You're fired now.
And also Elon Musk has bought Bloggingheads.
Yes.
No, so the first big change, Matt chickened out and got a haircut. People already knew that, right?
Yeah.
Disappointed in you, Matt. I mean, some of us haven't chickened out,
You stuck it out. I'm thinking of going even shorter, Bill. This is like there was that episode of The Simpsons where Mr. Burns puts together the softball team full of ringers, and he keeps telling Don Mattingly to cut his sideburns, a la George Steinbrenner. And eventually he's got like no hair. And it's like, Mattingly, cut those sideburns. And so Bill keeps getting on me. I'm going to the hair is going to keep getting shorter until Bill thinks I'm a conservative again.
Turn it into an ongoing drama.
You should go all the way to rock bottom and go man bun. Just be the absolute worst human possible.
Well, I could still almost do it if I shaved around the sides and I could pull the top up into a man bun. That could probably be done in a matter of months.
Would you get booted out of church in West Virginia if you went man bun?
It wouldn't help my standing, but I'm already...
I bet they weren't wild about the phase your hair already went through, right? At church, did you have to sit at the back or anything?
Nobody said anything, but it's. I now know to a certain degree what it, because there was a time, as you know, where I was the toast of the town, in DC, looking the part with the whole Brooks Brothers young Republican haircut, and then. I did experience a little bit of people following me around jewelry stores, Really? So I'm not saying that I've had the full experience of certain groups that have been historically oppressed, but I've had a taste of it with the long hair.
Yeah, I heard he's vaccinated.
Yeah,
yes,
the hippie in the back pew is vaccinated.
Yeah. So other changes. Let's see how to begin. For one thing, you guys are going off to your own YouTube channel. This is kind of there's a wave of this going on right now. In fact, you're the last to depart. So there were 4 regular kind of Bloggingheads shows on the Bloggingheads TV YouTube channel and the Bloggingheads TV site as of some months ago. Glenn Lowry, Aryeh Cohen-Wade's Culturally Determined, and you guys. We talked to a YouTube consultant. Happily, we didn't have to pay for him. He was a friend of a friend, but he actually knew what he was talking about. And he said, it's actually it would be in everyone's interest probably to migrate to your own YouTube channels. Unless you have, he said YouTube channels, he was talking about the way the algorithm works, basically. And he was saying, unless, it can be okay to have a bunch of different people or on a YouTube channel, as long as there's a lot of coherence, ideological coherence or just subject matter coherence. But we don't really have that. In fact, that was kind of the point of Bloggingheads, is that you don't have that. Like Glenn Lowry, he's distinctive set of issues, distinctive ideology. Aryeh Cohen-Wade, different ballpark altogether, and so on. So
our entire model of diversity flies in the face of the modern way of monetizing in the entire journalism industry, it seems.
Well, I think it probably does. He was talking specifically about the YouTube algorithm, but I think you're right. This is one of the kind of part of the dynamic of the polarization has been, I think, that it's hard to sustain an ideologically diverse audience. I mean, that's what makes you two unusual. It kind of makes me unusual because I have a variety of guests. I mean, I have, I'm the constant theme in the show, and I have my own ideology. But I talk to, Brett Stevens and Bill Kristol and people who aren't exactly on my wavelength. Yeah, that's hard to do. I'm still going to try to do it. You guys will still be doing it. But he convinced us it doesn't make sense for all of us to try to do our different things on the same YouTube channel. And so Glenn, we talked to him about that. He made the move earliest. Aryeh has moved I'm not sure if he's going to be doing video. He's definitely moved to his own podcast, Culturally Determined, which I recommend. And now you guys are going to be doing this. So first of all, people who want to watch you on YouTube should go to it's the Matt Lewis channel. Is that the channel this is going to be on?
Yeah, unfortunately, because of the difficulties of getting monetization on YouTube, ideally we would start a DMZ YouTube channel. Instead, it'll be at youtube.com/Matt Lewis, and I will create a DMZ kind of subsection where we'll post these.
I think that makes sense, probably. Yeah. I mean, I think our consultant would say that makes sense. Because for one thing, he said, if you're going to maintain your own channel, bare minimum of frequency is once a week. You know, and so you should be probably posting something that often. And I know you post some of your own stuff, Matt, right? And
I think between what Bill and I do, and then what I'm already doing on that same page with other people. And by the way, it's also me interviewing people that I don't necessarily always agree with as well. But it's similar in the sense that there are usually very civil conversations. So I think that this will give us, constant content multiple times a week, and it'll be similar enough that hopefully it works.
Yeah. So then there's a different change happening that ultimately converges with this change, but that is kind of a rebranding thing, which is that. Bloggingheads, the name, is being pretty much retired. The YouTube channel will be called Nonzero or Robert Wright's Nonzero or something. The point is, it'll have the same name as my newsletter, Nonzero. My own podcast feed will be renamed from The Wright Show to Robert Wright's Nonzero. People, there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that people have especially people who, haven't been around for 17 years, which is, following me, which is a lot of people who don't fit that profile. They happen upon my stuff and they're like, I'm confused. I mean, there's a lot of, Nonzero and Bloggingheads is just the beginning of it. I won't bore you with the various different brands I've floated and so on. But a number of people have said you really should kind of pick a brand and stick with it. And so, since I'm going to be, it's ultimately going to be only my content on the Bloggingheads YouTube channel, might as well be my brand. There's another consideration, which is just that, the era in which Bloggingheads makes sense is kind of over. I mean, when Bloggingheads started in November of 2005, we were, I think, the first ever on the whole internet site where you had, split screen dialogue, video dialogue between two people who weren't in the same place and were talking about politics, public affairs, and so on. And this was before broadband really hit. So we had to, I won't bore you with how we actually did this, but it wasn't like this. I
remember we used to literally talk on a phone.
On a phone. And you couldn't see the person you were talking to. And then you would be recording a local video file, each of you. You would each upload your video files to a server afterwards. We would stitch them together and synchronize them. And so it was a convoluted technology. And that's why we were the first. It wasn't easy to do. And so it became this kind of mecca because at the same time, there was this whole new phenomenon of the blog. There was this whole new category of journalists that they weren't at these name brand newspapers. You weren't going to see them on TV, by and large, cable TV at that point. Bloggingheads became the place where you saw them. And although a lot of them, whether it's Ezra Klein or they went on the list, to be
a lot of them ended up becoming
Chris Hayes, Ari Melber, a lot of the video people did their first video on Bloggingheads, a lot of cable TV potentates. and we made a point to get, people who disagreed together and so on. And so, I think it performed an important service. It was on the New York Times for a while. But now
people forget. You would go to the New York Times website and it would be like Bill and I would be on the home page. It's pretty amazing.
No, it was. And then they naturally went to, they made a decision that they wanted to go to like highly produced video, which made sense. High production values, which we didn't frankly have, and highly produced, edited and everything. So that was kind of
promoting their own in-house talent too.
Yeah, that too. But anyway, it was this great thing, but the need for it is kind of past. I mean, because now technology permits any two people in the world who want to have a split screen video content conversation and put it on YouTube to do that. And so people are naturally doing it in their own homes, their Substack newsletters and so on. So it doesn't particularly make sense to keep trying to do that. I mean, I think, if I had devoted my life to turning this into a huge enterprise and succeeded, then it could still make sense because it would be the one place everybody wanted to come. And it would have this mammoth audience. It has a decent sized audience, but not an audience that's going to tempt Glenn Greenwald away from the audience he can generate himself, right? So, I mean, these people show up every once in a while on my show or something. It's just that they don't. This is no longer going to be this kind of mecca. So
let me just say, kudos to you and Mickey for being at the vanguard of this. I mean, it not only was it just a logistical feat to pull off, but to have the vision to do it is super awesome. So thanks for letting us be a part.
And it's not just that you sort of lucked out and were the first to do something that someone else would have been the first to do if it wasn't for you. I think you put together a community of people that was very unique. And I'm not even sure it's been replicated ever since, to have that kind of diversity of voices.
No, it's interesting. I mean, we tapped into a lot of early blogging talent. I mean, not just people who went on to video, but Matt Iglesias and people like that. And people who at the time had these huge blogs like Ann Althouse and so on. And it became the place they could talk. And what was interesting was a lot of them were talking for the first time. And in some cases, they had written about each other in hostile fashion. Mm-hmm. And you one thing you noticed was that face-to-face conversations tended to have a civilizing influence. It was even though they couldn't see each other, they were talking to each other, and that tended to lead to more productive dialogue. Mm-hmm. So it was cool, and
but also against the trend of the whole technology, which seems to have contributed to polarization and siloing and echo chambers.
Yeah.
At the time there was the tech utopianism though of the hope that all this stuff would bring us together and democratize things, and that didn't really work out.
Not entirely, no. I'm actually writing a piece about that in my newsletter this week.
Actually, it did democratize things, and that was a disaster.
Well, what the founders always worried about.
That's related to what I'm writing, because I'm taking off on the John Haidt piece in The Atlantic that you probably have seen reference to. But so anyway, also, I mean, the name Blogging Heads, it's like blogging, the age of blogging is kind of over. A lot of people probably don't even get the reference, which was to Talking Heads, not so much the group. I mean, the group itself was named after Talking Heads in the sense of like people on TV talking, like anchor people, pundits, anchor men, and so on. And I think so. It was a great brand. Now I do think we're going to leave the name on the site, the Blogging Heads TV site itself, which is no longer where most people imbibe the video. Most people just do it on YouTube. And for that matter, there are more people who listen to it than watch it on the audio podcast. So that's a real minority of the audience, but that site will continue, I think, to just have the name Blogging Heads. It'll be at the same URL. It'll be a place where people can find the archives. And at least, for the next few months, it will be a place where they can find, assuming that what we've been talking about works out, they can find your show if they want to watch it there, which is great. And Glenn's show. The same is true for the Blogging Heads TV audio podcast feed. You'll be able to find Glenn's stuff, your stuff for a few months. Probably after that, you'll need to go to YouTube if you want to watch the video, or their own audio podcast feeds if you want to listen to the audio. But we'll get there'll be plenty of notification about that transition coming from the people you're listening to. Like,
but I've always found in all my time, I've been literally blogging almost 20 years now. My first blog was about 20 years ago. So I've been writing online for that time. And every time I've moved to something else, I would think, well, everyone who reads me now will follow me where I go next. And that always was never true at all.
Yeah. Now, you got to work and at that. And so I think, you two should either have some kind of recorded preamble on your audio podcast weeks and weeks and weeks ahead of any transition like that. In other words, if you're not going to be on the Blogging Heads TV audio feed, give them plenty of notice. Yeah. Same with the video site. But you're right. It's shocking that how few people seem to wake up in the morning saying, wherever Bob Wright is, I'm going to go find him. Darn it!
There's so much competition now for our attention. And Chris Wallace learned this the hard way, right? I mean, this is a guy. Chris Wallace is a guy who I would argue was perhaps the best Sunday morning host, great interviewer, tough, smart, good debate moderator. And if I were flipping the channels and I ran by him on Fox News and he was interviewing somebody, like, I very well might stop and watch. But it's not like I'm a Chris Wallace fan that I'm going to sign up for I'm not going to sign up for CNN Plus to get Chris Wallace. And so if Chris Wallace has this problem, how could any, that's just an example of how all of us are hustling out there to.
Chris Wallace has an even bigger problem right now, which he jumped to a new platform that then got incinerated. So.
Yeah, that was.
But part of the reason it got incinerated was people like Chris Wallace weren't in and of themselves weren't able to bring an audience.
Yeah, there's just so much content out there. I mean, it's a jungle, and we should remind people for that reason to whoever you want to support. Certainly, if it's one of us, but whoever you want to support them. I mean, rate and review. Do what you can. Share their content. If you really believe in anybody, you should give them that help, because the competition is just super intense. You tend to see after things go through this period of a thousand flowers blooming, the early blogosphere, the early podcast era, you tend to get consolidation, big platforms buying up the big blogs, like Andrew Sullivan's blog. It went to Time and then the Atlantic, or vice versa or something. And so, people like us do face not just competition from a lot of people like us, but increasingly competition from major well-funded platforms that are doing a lot of marketing. I don't want to generate too much pity, but a little would be nice.
Well, I could just be honest about it. It's tough to stay in this industry. The changes that are taking place to stay relevant. I could just tell you, as a conservative who once upon a time was able to provide a service and have a sort of a niche of explaining conservatives, and oftentimes explaining here's why you shouldn't be afraid of us. We want to help people flourish, and let me explain it to you. That entire deliverable has basically been undone. And now there's a new breed of people on the right who are, on the alt-right or the nationalist or the populist right, who are very relevant. They're getting tons of Twitter followers. They're starting podcasts, whatever. They're getting a ton of attention now, and they're much more relevant in the sense of they are, sort of at the forefront of the weird right-wing stuff that's happening now. And so it is, you're sort of climbing, it's like Donkey Kong, like you're climbing a ladder trying to get ahead in your career, but people are moving the ladders and they're throwing barrels on you. And I could just say, like, in my personal life, I'm experiencing all sorts of a season of changes. And this is just one more of them. I mean, life is full of changes and we embrace them. But the fact that Bloggingheads as an institution is not going to be what it once was, there's a little bit of a feeling of loss and of more change being thrust on us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm definitely, it's a bittersweet feeling for me. There would be a much higher ratio bitter to sweet if I weren't going to keep doing what I've been doing on the platform, and if people like you weren't going to keep doing what they started doing on the platform. I mean, I feel great about the fact that you guys probably wouldn't be doing this if we hadn't started Bloggingheads. I mean, Glenn Lowry, for God's sake, who's now like a national phenomenon. I mean, of course, he's a well-known intellectual in his own right, but he would have been unlikely to stumble onto a platform like an audio video platform, which is what really helped him kind of, catch the wave that he's caught. He and John McWhorter, they probably know of each other, but they're like this, major piece of online chemistry now, and they still will be. I mean, so that's great. And all the,
this has been very helpful to me, I can say. And Bill and I have talked about this before, but there have been multiple occasions where I would be recognized on the street in DC back when I worked in downtown every day. And I was more often noted for Bloggingheads than for CNN or anything else.
It's funny. Years and years ago, this was during the Scooter Libby prosecution, because I was having coffee with David Korn in DC. He was another early blogging head. And I remember the prosecutor walked in, whatever his name was, Fitzpatrick or something. And David Korn pointed him out. And David was at that point saying, well, why don't, maybe you should start generating like a little revenue from Bloggingheads and like giving me a piece of the action. And right after he said,
typical capitalist.
Yeah, these leftists, they call themselves leftists, but what do they want in life? But anyway, right after he said that, some young woman walks in and looks at us and says, "You guys are on Bloggingheads TV," and then she walked out. I said, "David, you should be paying me." Okay.
Well, maybe he paid her to come in and pretend that she recognized.
Actually, I paid her, but I left that part out. Anyway, no, that was cool. Glenn used to say he was recognized in foreign countries, so anyway, here we are. Now there's 1 billion podcasters, but we're still standing. And honestly, that's like an accomplishment in this environment. So why don't
before we? Sorry,
yeah. No,
I was
going
to say we should probably do some actual, DMZing.
Absolutely,
while we're here together.
Yeah, no, I want to. As I'm a regular listener, there's some questions I want to ask.
First time caller, first time
guest, long time host. But I want to ask you some big picture questions. I mean, anything you want to bring up about this week's news, fine. But the big looming questions are, I would say, for Matt, will Donald Trump be the nominee? And for Bill, will Joe Biden be the nominee? And should he? I know Matt's answer to the should he part of the Trump question, no. But that's even Mickey Kouse's answer now, and Mickey voted for him twice. But I'm curious about your takes on those, not to force you to make a prediction that will ruin your reputation in a couple of years.
That's already shot, man. in the sense of when you write 3 columns a week and do 2 or 3 podcasts a week, there aren't a lot of there are not a lot of unpublished thoughts. So I've got a lot of predictions out there. I'll say to your question about Trump, the first caveat is that obviously nobody knows anything, right? So I'll just be completely transparent and modest about it. Nobody really knows what's going to happen. But I think if you're betting, you do bet on Trump. I mean, I don't think, maybe if it's Trump versus the field, but I think you still go, I think just the smart money is that you bet on Trump. He's the nominee.
If Elon Musk lets him back on Twitter, does that help Trump?
I'm going to say it does. Now, this is a controversial thing. I remember when Glenn Youngkin was running for Virginia, for governor of Virginia last year, I actually think Youngkin was aided greatly by the fact that Donald Trump was not on Twitter. So I get the fact that there can be that Trump's presence on Twitter can have consequences that would hurt other Republicans. But in terms of Trump himself, I think it does help Trump.
Well, both of these questions cannot be fully answered before the midterms occur, because that's going to have a huge impact on the standing of both Biden and Trump. I mean, right now, you would say it's going to be a bad midterm year for Democrats. Biden's numbers are low 40s. Inflation is high. There isn't a fantastic legislative win that Democrats are championing. Maybe they should be championing infrastructure more, but they've not. So if things go as it midterm typically goes, on top of the fact that Biden is going to be in his 80s, his 80th birthday, I think, is this year.
Wow. Is it? That explains a lot.
I think he turns 80 towards the end of the year, if I remember. I have to double check that.
You're probably right.
So, like literally the day after the midterm, the night of the midterm, if it's a bad midterm, the chatter cranks up. Is this the guy to lead us? This weakened guy who couldn't stave off calamity of the midterm, is he the guy to lead us against what may well be Donald Trump and save us from total disaster? So, and if Biden doesn't make a quick decision, I would think people will jump in and force his hand.
Well, he did say this week, I think he officially announced he is running again.
Well,
I mean, he didn't launch the campaign, but
right.
You know what
he made some comment that that's his intention. But until you file the paperwork, not everyone's going to believe it. And so look, if you're someone who has an eye towards 2024, and Biden hasn't been crystal clear. I mean, if Biden doesn't run, I don't care your feelings about Kamala Harris, she would be the natural frontrunner. And as I've said a zillion times, VPs almost always win presidential primaries. They have a huge leg up. They have the name ID. They have donor networks. And Kamala's got an extra advantage, which is, there's not a whole lot of polling on this, but what we have seen, her standing with African Americans is much, much higher than what it was in the primaries in 2020. So you don't win the Democratic nomination without a healthy chunk of the African American vote, particularly in South Carolina, the way the schedule is currently constructed. Now they may move South Carolina even higher up in the process, which I actually don't agree with. I think cleanup spot's the best spot. They control the democratic process since 2008. Why give up what's a golden spot? But anyway, nevertheless, they will still have a lot of power one way or the other. So if it's not going to be Kamala, you got to find a way into that community, or find a way to splinter that community so it's not as powerful as it once was. So that's a tall order. And if you have any kind of shot at it, you need some first mover advantage. You can't wait and be the last one in. You got to start claiming some of that constituency for yourself. So I think there's incentive for non-Biden Harris candidates to move quickly if Biden or Harris don't themselves, which is why I think Biden is trying to send these signals out now, assuming he means it, He doesn't want to have a primary challenge. He wants to shut that down as quickly as possible.
Well, do you think any aspirants should wait until the midterms, or do you think it could actually be in somebody's advantage to throw their hat in the ring before the midterms? Does that seem like bad form?
I think it would seem bad form. That you're the disruptive one. I mean, the period between now and November should be unity time. I mean, the only way to save the midterm for Democrats is for them to be unified and for Republicans to be divided.
Right.
Well, that part is happening.
Well,
the division part is happening. And the sense, I mean,
division on both sides right now.
Yeah,
I would say, and and a tide, I think, goes to the runner Republicans, not to Democrats.
Republicans have the wind at their back. But I mean, just today, I'm watching people like Matt Gaetz attack Kevin McCarthy, and this is why here is the best case scenario for Democrats. Inflation starts to curtail. They managed to pass some sort of reconciliation bill, give progressives some kind of reason to get excited all over again. Ukraine is looking even more positive than it is right now, as far as Biden's foreign policy is concerned. While Trump is sowing division amongst Republicans, and some of Trump's endorsees either lose their primaries or, even more damaging, win their primaries and lose the generals and throw away seats that they should have won. In that circumstance, Biden may look like, hey, this guy can still run circles around Trump. And Republicans might say, why the hell are we going in with this guy a third time? He was president. He lost the House. He lost the Senate. He lost the presidency. He blew a golden midterm, for Pete's sake. Why is this guy our leader? But we can't know any of this until the midterm actually happens.
Now, Matt, is your logic on Trump that the Republican Party is now the Trumpist party and Trump is Trump? I mean, is that the logic behind saying he's going to be the guy who gets the nomination if he wants it? You can't out-Trump Trump among Trumpists, and Trumpists are going to decide the nomination. Is it kind of that simple?
Yeah, and the polling would all lead to us to conclude that he still is by far the dominant force in the Republican Party, and he craves attention, and he wants to be in the center of things. So I think he has the motivation to run. I would say that I do think Ron DeSantis is obviously deserves a mention here. I mean, this is a guy who is younger than Trump, more relevant in the sense that he's actually in government now. He's the governor of Florida, obviously. And he is, if you actually care about the culture war stuff, like if you're one of these J.D. Vance types who really wants to not just, self-aggrandize Donald Trump, but actually accomplish things in the culture war, DeSantis is actually doing that. So I don't discount him, but I still think if you're betting, you bet on Trump at this point.
I wrote a piece at the front of the year for Politico analyzing the potential 2024 candidates. And my take on DeSantis was he's doing the best job of being, Trump 2.0, but that doesn't get you very far if you're running against Trump. When right. Trump is in the early polling, when Trump is not in the mix, DeSantis is the front runner with Pence right behind him. If Trump is in the mix, then DeSantis has a harder time. Now, DeSantis may be, my knock on DeSantis was he hasn't carved out a path for himself that's distinct from Trump, where Pence at least has. Pence has a reason for running, even if Trump is in there. Whether you think he's got a shot or not is another story, but there's a case that's been developed. And I don't think DeSantis has quite made that case. Now, maybe the case simply is, I'm kicking ass and taking names. I'm not going to be necessarily mean to Trump and disparage his presidency. I'm just going to put myself out there and show you what I've done in Florida, and you can make up your own mind.
If you really believe, like I bet you, like Ann Coulter, I've not heard her talk about this yet, but I bet you Ann Coulter is really on. I assume she's really on Team DeSantis, and I'm guessing Mickey might be too, Mickey Kaus, because
Mickey seems like a big J.D. Vance fan too. I was going to ask you what you think about that, but I'll do that later. Go ahead.
Well, my point was going to be like Mickey and Ann Coulter. They like Trump, but they don't love him for the disruption or the chaos. They want to do things. They want to accomplish populist nationalist
Mickey
things.
and Coulter are very immigration specific.
Right.
Sure.
And
I'm not saying that there's enough Mickeys and Ann Coulters to build a 50% plus one coalition, even in the Republican Party. But I do think that DeSantis has carved a niche in the sense that, like, Trump talks about stuff. He's chaotic, but DeSantis is actually doing it. He's actually taking on the left.
But on immigration?
Well, no. I mean, not specifically on immigration. I'm just saying, like, on the culture war.
I wonder
immigration. But immigration is no longer. I know with Ann and Mickey, immigration is still at the center. But I think that things like CRT and the trans issue, trans and CRT and cancel culture, like those issues have become the dominant culture war issues. Not immigration is not up there, I don't think.
Well, an abortion might come very soon too, because the Supreme Court may rule in June that Roe was either gone or severely weakened. And DeSantis just passed the 15-week abortion ban, which puts him in line with Mississippi, not in line with Texas, which has the 6-week, fetal heartbeat ban. So I don't know if that puts him a little bit at odds with some folks on the social right. They didn't even go all the way. This week's another thing that I wrote just this past week, when I just sort of raised the question, I didn't quite answer it. Is Florida still a swing state? Now, I wrote an earlier piece suggesting that getting rid of Roe was not going to be good for Republicans, but specifically because you got a bunch of Sunbelt states, which are purple trending blue, that are Republican run, and now they're going to be forced to make a call on abortion that's not necessarily in line with where the constituencies are going. I'm thinking Texas, I'm thinking Arizona, I'm thinking North Carolina. Florida may be the other direction. Florida may be one that's going more to the right because influx of conservative retirees, not the New York, New Jersey retirees, but the Midwest retirees, and working class Latinos who are culturally conservative and very anti-socialist, Cubans, Venezuelans, those sort of people. So this is a real test because DeSantis is not governing like a swing stater. He's governing from the hard right. I mean, he's going well out of his way to pick culture war fights.
Yeah. What would be interesting is if Trump were out of the way, Glenn Youngkin versus Ron DeSantis would be a very interesting head-to-head. I would love to see that. That would have been like what I wanted. I wanted there to be like a Rubio versus a Ted Cruz match in 2016 and to settle this question, like which of these two parties are we going to be? And I felt like Trump interrupted that kind of organic the ability to sort of settle who we were. And that would be interesting to see as well.
Well, Youngkin's interesting. Youngkin is sort of like a Mitt Romney circa 2008, because Romney was governor of Massachusetts. So he got, look at me, I'm a Republican who won in a blue state. And then over the course of his term, he got increasingly conservative. He locked down health insurance reform, and then he started picking more, red meat fights, knowing he wasn't going to run for re-election, didn't have to face Massachusetts voters again. Right. And he can go to Republican primaries and say, hey, I fought the good fight here.
Youngkin's
term limited, right. So he's not worrying about making middle-of-the-road voters happy. DeSantis has to win re-election in November. Now, polling to date shows he's in fairly good shape, but we haven't seen polls since he went after Disney, which is, the Florida company. He's trying to say it's a company from Burbank, which is nominally true, but the bigger resort is in Orlando. It is, 50 million tourists a year. It's $75 billion in the Florida economy. And it's not like everyone who comes to Disney World is like a hipster from Brooklyn. It's still seen as a middle of the road company culturally by a lot of people. So it's again, if it's not a swing state anymore, maybe that doesn't matter. But I don't think we've seen polls to let us know if going against one of the most identifiable business in your state works for him. Not to make this whole math textbook thing. Which,
right. But but let me just jump in and play the conservative here, because I agree with what you said. But I would also say that because Disney's constituency are kind of is middle America, maybe they should not have been doing some of the, radical stuff that they were, at least some of the recordings that came out of meetings of some of the more creative types at Disney would lead you to believe that they were out of touch with kind of the middle American values.
I mean, DeSantis is basically saying to Florida, we're on one side of the culture war and Disney's on the other. And if Florida is a red state, then that may be a perfectly fine place for DeSantis to be. If it's not quite that red yet, and mind you, I mean, Florida's not insulated from the economy. There's inflation in Florida. So Democrats don't have a nominee yet. The primary is not for another 4 months. What happens if it's Charlie Crist or Nikki Fried, and there's a third person whose name escaped me, who's Latina? If they're able to say, well, DeSantis is picking all these nonsense fights, the economy here is terrible. He's not taking care of business as governor because he wants to try to out-Trump Trump. And I'm going to actually run this state in a way that's going to raise your cost of living. There's an opening to try to do that. But of course, it requires having a single nominee and a single voice. And again, I think it's a test. I mean, I don't think we can declare prematurely Florida is red and DeSantis is a lock based on February polls. There's more to play out here.
Matt, I want to hear your view on J.D. Vance. I guess he's a pretty unlikely candidate for this time around for president. You can imagine a scenario. But Mickey pays a lot of attention to him as if in the long run he could be the messiah of Trumpism. I don't know. I look at him and he just doesn't seem to me to look or sound like a natural, effective politician. But his cultural milieu a lot better than either I or Mickey does. So for that reason, among others, I'm curious about your take on him.
Well, he doesn't strike me as like a great natural politician like a Bill Clinton or a Ronald Reagan or something like that. But I think that he is in the mold. So obviously he's bankrolled by Peter Thiel. By a lot of money. Obviously, he has his own celebrity status as a, best-selling author of Hillbilly Elegy. Obviously, he has Trump's endorsement. He is now the front runner for that Senate race in Ohio.
So not by a lot yet. It's still
it's always been tight. Even when he was like in fourth place, it was fourth or fifth place. He was like within 3 points, I think, of first. So it's unclear to me. It's too soon to say that he's going to be the winner, but he's now the front runner. I don't see him as this kind of charismatic leader of the party, as a figurehead or a front runner, sort of a presidential candidate. I do see him sort of like as a Josh Hawley, someone who is smart and sophisticated in a sense, and someone who is like very ideologically committed now to this kind of populist nationalist thing in a way that like DeSantis is, in a way that Hawley is, in a way that Tucker is, and in a way that Trump is not. And so I would think that J.D. Vance could be a very important and significant senator advancing this philosophy. I do not see him on my kind of short list of people I would bet on to be a future, president.
Yeah. And Bill, I have a question for you. Mm-hmm. Do you agree with me as somebody who would, like me, like the Democrats, to win the next presidential election? Mm-hmm. I think you don't agree with me. I personally consider both Biden and Kamala Harris disastrous candidates for the Democrats. I just think they both have real trouble in a general. Now, obviously, if Trump is the alternative, that opens up possibilities because A, he's a little bit of a polarizing figure, and B, you never know what he'll do. But I just think if you almost randomly select the Democratic senator or governor or something, is a slight exaggeration, but you're in better shape than with either Biden or Kamala. I could go through my reasons if you want. I mean, on Biden, I don't know if you remember, but I think it was a couple of years before the last presidential election. I think it was before he was even officially a candidate. We had a little Twitter exchange. It was kind of incidental. Yeah. You probably don't remember it, but I said,
I remember.
I had just seen him on ABC and I said, this guy is losing it cognitively. I didn't put it quite like that, but I said, I predict if he runs for president, and maybe he was already running, but it was a ways earlier. I predict there will be one of these moments that really gets a lot of attention. Like, does this guy have it together anymore? It turned out there was no disastrous moment, but there were moments.
He also was able to hide. He was also able to hide. I mean, I don't mean that like in a pejorative sense, but he did not have to run a normal campaign because of COVID. So
that's true. That's
he
very
was
true.
able to do a lot of stuff on Zoom, a lot of stuff from his basement. If he had been out there on the hustings, hustling day in and day out, being followed by a press corps, that may have materialized.
And he does some of that now. And I think, although of course some of these videos are edited unfairly, I see alarming signs. I mean, there's a number of things, including some that I think could be gravely consequential. I mean, like when you're in the middle of a war involving Russia, I think you should stick to the script, right? And I'm a little alarmed he doesn't seem to be entirely doing that. And but more than that, it's just these weird things, like when he was talking to those troops in, I think, Poland, and saying like, well, when you get to Ukraine, you'll see, like, I don't think they're going to Ukraine. And if they are, you should have led with that. That's the fucking news. Okay, see, Joe?
I don't see things like that as cognitive decline. These strike me as very much in line of Biden, middle-aged Biden, not just elderly Biden. Speaking loosely, not always being super literal. Like when you see Ukraine, it doesn't have to be like when you literally cross the border as ground troops in Ukraine. Just more colloquially, if you see Ukraine, if you saw it up close, you would see X. And just saying genocide loosely, this guy has to go loosely. That seems like kind of Biden, Mr. Everyman.
He's always been a little loose-lipped. There's no doubt about it.
Not to say that there aren't signs of aging.
Right.
He doesn't have the same crispness that he had when he was 50 years old, but I don't think it's quite the same as cognitive decline. And I don't think he hasn't had a Dianne Feinstein type obvious repeating yourself, loss of memory,
but I just think,
kind of moment.
I mean, even if you want to view it as normal decline, like you said, he's going to be 80.
Yeah.
Well, look. And what are the chances that he'll get through a presidential campaign 4 years after the last one without kind of moments that raise questions that are bigger than the moments we saw last time around?
It's not an ideal place for Democrats to be in.
Thank you.
And when you're 80, I mean, it just hovers over everything. I mean, he's not as vigorous a presence as he once was. He's not on your TV every day reminding you that I'm still totally on point. That he's parceled out. And when there are other examples of, Democrats in disarray, I mean, take Title 42, for example, just the fact that the party doesn't have its act together on it, that Biden puts out a statement that we're going to get rid of this thing, and there's this whole pushback and this question whether they have a plan for the aftermath. I'm not saying it's not necessarily fair or accurate, but it sort of gives the impression that who's running the show here. Mm-hmm. Or Biden saying, I think you should be able to not have to wear a mask on a plane, and then the same day the CDC and Justice Department file a lawsuit. On one hand, people don't like having excessive executive power and want deference to civil service sometimes. But when you see it in action, it feels like, hey, who's running the show here? So all that combined is not a great alignment of stars for Democrats. And ideally, I thought this was going to be the case for a while, that Biden would have one solid term and say, I did my part here. See, have a good life. But
I think that would be the smart thing for him, and he could go down in history as having done a great service for the country. I was the Trump killer. I realized that it's time for me to go. That would be wonderful.
Yeah, but if he's handing us, think it's John Maxwell says, without a successor, there is no success. If Joe Biden is handing us and the Democratic Party an heir apparent that's Kamala Harris, and the stakes are she's now going up against Trump, those are the stakes. I don't know if you want if that's a great way to write off.
As I said, I think they're both. I think they're both deeply problematic.
I think it's just a tragedy in this country. I mean, this is an obvious point, but I just think it is so tragic that these are the best people we have to offer.
Well, let me get to Kamala. And I'm running a little late in another meeting, but I do want to finish this conversation. So, I mean, Biden was, I'd argue, the strongest nominee for 2020 because Democrats, while very much a multicultural, culturally liberal, progressive party, and have done a good job pulling in college-educated suburbanites from Republicans and broadening their base that way, you still need some working class support. You can't totally pretend that that isn't a huge part of the country. And if you're going to get to 50% plus one, you got to be that broad. Right. And Biden was very uniquely situated because the party is not recruiting from the coal mines, not recruiting from the steel workers for their politicians. I mean, and you might say Biden's attachment to labor is phony, but he's been pulling that shtick literally since his first campaign in 1972.
Yeah, on paper, I agree with all that. I'm just saying, I mean, just a couple of things. Like, the question isn't, is he suffering from cognitive decline? The question is, does the way he will behave from now until the election give the opponent the opportunity to create a bunch of killer videos? The answer is yes. There's going to be a bunch of killer videos. B, it's like, look at where we are. Inflation is going to be a big problem. It's just not going to be a great. It's just not going to be a great. It's not necessarily his fault, although the Ukraine war sanctions, which were his doing, are contributing to it. But it's just now maybe the pandemic will finally resolve itself. That'll cheer people up. I just think he's going to have what looks like a bad environment in which to be an incumbent. That'll apply to some extent to Kamala. I think the Democrats.
Well, not going to apply to some extent to anybody. I mean, if Democrats are going to 2024 with inflation still bad. I mean, it's Jimmy Carter all over again. You know, I mean,
Jimmy Carter was the incumbent, though. I'm saying what you don't want is the incumbent running in an environment like that. I don't know, Matt. Do you have any?
I think I agree with what Bill's probably going to say that it's true. It would the bad news would transfer to whoever the Democratic nominee is, and that the environment and probably would not be favorable to a Democrat. If we have all these things continuing, and Bob, I'm with you. I think that inflation is not going away anytime soon, and that they probably should just keep raising interest rates.
Well, I mean, we may raise interest rates, and they probably should raise interest rates, but that may trigger a recession, which also would be not good for Democrats short run.
Got to go through it sometimes.
I want to get back to Kamala though, because to the extent that Biden is going to be damaged goods by 2024 and you want a fresher face, you still need somebody who can stitch together that kind of coalition. And the obvious knock against Kamala, and I'm not a Kamala hater. I've been very positive on Kamala in a lot of respects of what I've written, but I do think it's an objective fact that they have not used the last 18 months and probably next 6 months following to shore her up and build a reputation in working class communities. I thought she would have been spending a lot more time on factory floors and labor halls in this period. So I don't think they've given her the opportunity to. I mean, the value of being VP is that you get facing that nobody else has, and instead she's been put into a lot of awkward positions. She's made her own gaffes. So she's not a
great political talent at all. And that's part of the problem. I just don't think she's very good.
I'm not as hard on her as that. I mean, I think VP is a tough gig for anybody. There's very few people that come in a VP looking awesome. Every VP looks lesser. Well, I should say, we be more precise about this. I've said this before. We're used to VPs in semi-recent history being the political elder statesperson next to the young, fresh-faced president. It hasn't been since Bush Quayle, where you have the elder statesman president and the young upstart as VP. And Quayle had a very rough VP. Kamala has an extra complication, has several extra complications. She wasn't in Washington all that long in the first place. She doesn't have Washington relationships. She hasn't been in a lot of Washington circumstances, crucibles to sharpen those skills. Plus, she's a first. She's the first woman. She's the first person of color. So she's being held to that kind of Jackie Robinson standard, which can be very tough. So she has a lot of challenges in that respect. But it doesn't mean that there's somebody else on the bench that is perfectly situated to put together that kind of broad coalition, because the Democrats are full of college-educated, wonky, hipster types who don't have a lot of currency either with white working class or black working class, for that matter. I mean, you can't be, it was Pete Buttigieg who was the second coming. He got hammered in 2020 because he had no ties to the black community, and he hasn't built them up in the last 18 months. So if you're Pete Buttigieg, why do you make your next political act running against Kamala Harris so you can be hammered again for getting in the way of the advancement of an African American woman?
I'm not advocating a Pete Buttigieg candidacy. Don't
but
worry.
Who do you advocate? Who is the obvious person?
I mean, what's the name of that guy, the senator in the Midwest who apparently some people thought he didn't run because he had skeletons in his car?
Scher Brown.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
He's the type. But sometimes I'll just see a guy on TV like a Chris Murphy and think, well, he's not too charismatic, but he's smart. He's not going to screw up. You don't like. There's no constituency that looks at him and dislikes him in the Democratic Party. And I don't know his exact legislative record, but it just seems to me Kamala alienates a lot of people. The left doesn't like her.
I think that is not. I think that
doesn't matter. Fine.
That's a plus, not a minus.
But I just see disaster in the general. I just see disaster in the general for her and probably for Biden.
Well, there's really no reason to believe that she has political talent. Like there's never been, as far as I know, it's not like she was a great star in the minor leagues and did a whole bunch of great things and then got promoted and it's her first season. No, as far as I know, there's never been she's never actually had a great moment.
One viral moment, and I've heard you talk about this on DMZ, Matt, because that viral moment didn't even wind up bearing fruit. It was in the Brett Kavanaugh hearings before the Me Too the Me Too phase. And she's doing, she is a prosecutor. She's good at badgering people. She was doing an effective job. She was saying, do you know people at this law firm? And she's getting him defensive. It's like you're making progress. He seemed to have something to hide. It was very effective. That really went viral. My wife is like, I love this woman. But then she didn't deliver. It was like the next day we're waiting. Mm-hmm. Okay, we'll drop it. Why is this connection nefarious? We never heard. So, but I think that moment put her on the radar screen. And, she can do various kinds of scripted things pretty well. I think she overdoes it sometimes, but fine. But she doesn't handle herself. She doesn't think on her feet well. She doesn't.
But there are other politicians who have succeeded in life who also are not good at these things. Neither George Bush was fantastic in all circumstances. Jimmy Carter came out real hot in '76, but then his weaknesses began to materialize. And
I think those guys were much better on their feet than Kamala. Much better.
Either Bush?
Yeah. Well,
I can hear
George
you.
W.
And the people who knocked down those buildings can hear us.
Not George W. No, I meant his father. But
his father had W. HW had the watch thing in '92. There's a whole book of gaffes that got published.
Those were bad raps. The thing at the supermarket, people were just picking on him, man. Those were trivial things. You look at your fucking watch during a debate and it's a crime. I mean, come on.
But these things mattered at the time, and Bill Clinton didn't do the same sort of thing.
It was just a hostile media. Those were not.
I'm going to agree with Bob on this one. You might be surprised, but I think, and by the way, the idea that the RNC doesn't want to do these debates, and now that we have the ability to have a parallel infrastructure, parallel media, you can understand why Republicans felt like they were getting screwed because of things like that.
Well, because there are Democrats saying that the media has been overly attentive to inflation and ignored job growth and wage hikes and how we got through the pandemic without an economic collapse. I mean, everyone's got their media complaints. Good politicians.
More people have died from COVID under Joe Biden.
Well, that would be a fair comment for the media to make. That would actually depict how he handled COVID versus Trump. A great politician can thrive in hostile environments. A great politician can find a way to either not make gaffes or overcome gaffes. Everyone makes little mistakes, or everyone deals with things that get overhyped by the media, and great politicians have a bond with the public and a certain kind of aplomb that allows them to persevere. And I'm not saying Kamala has all that.
But the deck is stacked against...
I'm saying she is getting treated more harshly than other typical average politicians who have suffered the same thing.
I'll put it to you this way. I agree with you that great politicians like Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, they are so talented, they can overcome it. But not everyone has those, is that blessed. If Kamala Harris were a Republican, she would be Dan Quayle. She would be a laughing stock right now. And Jimmy Kimmel and whoever, I don't even know who's on late night TV, they would never be done making fun of her. The Jon Stewarts of the world. If she were a Republican, she would be palinized, she would be Quaylenized, whatever.
And Republicans would love her all the more and tout her to be the next president of the United States.
Okay, but what about back in the day, before Donald Trump, before Fox News, before Rush Limbaugh? She would have been destroyed by the media.
I think she's just such a good figure for a Trump to run against, She's like almost brought on from central casting.
Yeah.
Not fairly necessarily, but, the subtext would be this is just more identity politics, and
that's why I think she should have spent her time transcending that stereotype, transcending that caricature.
She needs Sister Soldier moments.
I mean, I don't think it had to be that crass, but I just think she should have had more time talking about bread and butter issues on factory floors, hanging out with construction workers and all that kind of thing, to say, I'm a Biden Democrat. Mm-hmm. I'm not a Berkeley Democrat. I'm a Biden Democrat. I mean, that's not say that bluntly, but give that impression. And they haven't invested the time into broadening her brand.
I agree. And how come nobody does these things anymore? Like what Bill is describing is a very logical, smart, political PR strategy, and nobody does that anymore. I don't understand why they're not doing things like that.
I mean, they did a little. I mean, she's done a few things like that, just not nearly as much as I would have thought, and not so much that overwhelms.
When you're trying to change perceptions and create a brand, you don't nibble around the edges. You have to beat people over the head with it.
What I think people don't easily accept is that being president is hard. Being president in ongoing crisis is hard. And it's hard to think through every little thing that you should be doing when you're dealing with a fire hose of problems.
But Kamala's not president. And I would think that if I were her, I would be spending at least half my time, because God knows she's not solving the border crisis. She's not going to the border. If I were her, I would be spending a lot of time thinking, how can I position myself to win the presidency? And she got to take your advice.
But that has to be done in concert with Biden. She can't go off on her own. Any indication?
You were talking about hugging Biden. That would be her brand. Right. It's hugging Biden.
But that needs, anything they do has to be coordinated. So Biden gave her the immigration portfolio, obviously a hot potato, not designed to really allow her to show her best self. And I don't know what was this. I'm not saying that he was trying to sabotage her. It might have been thought through with, I'm going to put you in these tough situations so you'll have the ability to say in 2024, I dealt with X, I dealt with Y, and I dealt with Z, and these people haven't. But in retrospect, I think that probably wasn't the best way to deploy her.
Unless she was going to become a border hawk and wrap herself in the flag, and but she didn't want to do that, and she didn't do that.
I mean, immigration is just such an an impossible subject.
It's a tough one. It's a tough one for a Democrat.
But there are Democrats. There are Democrats in Texas who are on Fox News talking about it. You know, I guess it's hard as a vice president to go on TV and
but they're alienating other Democrats. She may be moving toward the outer space portfolio, and space, as you may have heard, connects us. It unites. Did you hear the Kamala space?
That kind of I saw
that was kind of unfair. Kind of unfair editing.
These like totally banal politician comments that they all make.
Yeah, but see, the
don't get clipped for her.
No, but what it was first of all, it was banal enough to have, I think, a red flashing light. Like a good editor goes, no, this is good. But also, she just delivered it with such, drama and empathy, and it just came off as so ridiculous. Space unites us.
I think you could play that trick with almost any politician, but we just don't do it to every politician.
You could. And that gets back to poor George, the first Bush. It's like he looks at his watch and he's toast. And part of the question is like, what is the media going to seize on? Of course, these days, there is no the media. There's just one tribe's media and the others. And it may be that it almost doesn't matter because you can always dishonestly edit stuff. You can make Joe Biden look senile if he sounds like William Jennings Bryan for the next 2 years. You can still do it.
Wasn't there a clip recently where it looks like Biden is turning to try to shake hands with someone who's not even there?
Yeah.
But it turned out he was, at least according to the fact checker, and I don't know, but apparently he was just like gesturing to the crowd.
That could be. And so what if he did? So what if there had been a guy there who then moved back as he was talking or something? But that's a perfect example of how editing can do anything. And more, you just got these two media ecosystems that are going to edit the hell out of everything. And so you're toast in one ecosystem no matter what you do. I don't know.
There's no objective reality, of course.
If you have a good bond with the public, that stuff can bounce off of you. Kamala has, I think, a certain bond with a section of the Democratic Party, but it's not broad enough as it stands today to easily survive that. But the problem is there's no one else on the bench that is perfectly situated to play that role.
I would say if it's Trump versus Kamala, I definitely would bet Trump.
But Trump. It's not like Trump played immigration to a T and rode to re-election that way. Like he has his own problems. He has his own limitations as a candidate. So much is going to hinge upon what does the actual economy look like in 2024, which we cannot know today.
But we are pundits today, Bill. We are punditing today.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm like 20 minutes late to a meeting.
So Bill has somebody more important than you and me to talk to.
I'm staying them up for you.
We were just a
I give you 12 of the best years of my life. And this is how you repay
me. Exactly. I just want to close by joining you, Matt, in chastising Bill for not being conversant in the Andy Griffith oeuvre.
Yes. Great show.
This is the America I grew up in. When I grew up, it was a weekly show. This is pre-reruns. Mm-hmm. This is the America that I grew up in. It was a great place to be. And Bill, you should do better. I just want to close with those words.
Yes.
Bill, do better.
I concur.
So folks, I think the way this will work is this will be on the Bloggingheads YouTube channel. From now on, they should look for your show YouTube-wise on the Matt Lewis YouTube channel. It will still be on the Bloggingheads site for at least a couple of months to come. It will be on the Bloggingheads audio podcast feed. If those things are going to change, you will get, I think, plenty of notice via you guys and your astute public relations skills, right?
I'm going to employ Bill Scher's excellent messaging.
Oh, that is the first mistake.
The advice he would give Kamala is the advice we're going to use to promote this podcast.
Well, let's hit the factory floors.
That should work. I just think if you keep reminding people that space unites us, I think you'll both be fine. So stick with that. Hey, and thanks. I'm glad that the DMZ is going to continue to thrive. I will continue to listen in, and I encourage you to do it if possible every single Thursday. Saves me a lot of time.
You just sit there hitting refresh, wondering why.
I'm starting to think about just when Mickey will say something to me, and then just hit play and have one of you guys respond, and then sit back and watch. But anyway, until then, I will just be a parasite on your show, parasitic upon you, as they say in biology. And really appreciate all you've done. Keep it up. We will see you in all the aforementioned venues.
Thank you.
I always welcome the DMZ, Bob.
Yes.
This was fun. I'll take you up on that.
Excellent.
Okay. Take care.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.